So it's exactly what we were doing before, except now a does not equal 1. That's all that's really trying to say. A does not equal 1, which makes it just a little bit trickier. Because basically, you're looking for the same thing. You're looking for what's going to multiply to be something and add up to that middle term. But now we have to do an extra step, which involves the GCF. Okay? So we're always going to check to see if we can divide out the GCF first. Sometimes there's going to be a greatest common factor between all three terms that we want to take out in the beginning to make it a little bit easier. Sometimes it's also not going to be in the right order. It's not going to necessarily look like that. So we have to identify A, B, and C. So it's not always in that order. The A is always in front of the x term, the B is always in front of the x squared. B is always in front of the x, and then C is always a constant without an x. Now we're going to try to find two numbers that multiply to be A times C. So we're not just looking for A and C. We're looking for things that multiply to be whatever A times C is. So I'm just going to call those M and N for now. And that same combination of numbers should add up to be B. So that part didn't change from before. We're still looking for stuff that's going to add up to be B, but this part's a little bit different. We're looking for stuff that's going to multiply to be A times C. We're going to rewrite the original expression with 4 terms instead of 3, and that's going to happen by splitting the middle term. These are really steps that you're going to go back to once you start practicing this. This is not going to make a whole lot of sense right now. We are going to group the first 2 terms. That's what I mean by factor by grouping. This is the grouping part of it. And group the second 2 terms, and then factor each by using the GCF. The first term, when I say term, I mean x plus n. That is going to come from whatever's in both of these parentheses. The first term comes from whatever is left in both parentheses. The second one, I'm going to call that x plus n. That's going to come from combining the 2 GCFs that we pulled out. You can still FOIL to check to make sure you did it correctly. I get that probably doesn't make a lot of sense without doing practice problems. So the first thing I want to do is just multiply A times C. What would A times C be there? Yeah.
How is A and C?
Where's the A and C in this thing?
There is no A and C, so only X or...
The A and C are the 2 things, like, in this expression.
Oh, it's the 4 and 2.
It's the 4 and negative 2. Make sure you do the sign. So 4 times negative 2. That's negative 8. And the B is, we're looking for something that's going to add up to 7 while it multiplies to be negative 8. What are those 2 things? So this is really the same thing that we were doing before. Stuff that multiplies to give us this and adds to give us that. What could that be?
It will be 8 minus 1. It will be 8 times minus 1.
8 and negative 1. All right, so that's the combination that we have to use. That is 8 times negative 1. That combination adds up to 7. Okay? And that's how we're going to split up this middle term. 4x squared doesn't change. I'm going to split that 7x into these 2 terms, into an 8x and a negative 1x. The negative 2 didn't change at all. All I really did was split this into 2 different things. The order actually doesn't matter. If you happen to do it the other way around, if you did it like this, I'll write this part. But if you did it with the negative 1x in front and the 8x second, it doesn't change anything. That and that are the exact same thing. Okay, so I think that was step 4 where we did the splitting. So that was splitting this term into that and that. Now we're going to group the terms. We're talking about this is one group, and this is the second group. And I'm going to factor the greatest common factor out of these two, and the greatest common factor out of these two. What's the biggest thing I can factor out of these two? 4, a little bit more. I have an x squared and an x. So I'm going to take out 4x. This turns into just x. This turns into plus 2. That's just dealing with the first terms, the first really set of places there.
How would it change to x plus 2? Why is it not minus x?
Because this was a positive to start out with. And I'm factoring out a positive 4. I'm really just dividing that by positive. Are you talking about this group?
Yeah.
That I'm going to factor these.
Oh. Well, then where did you get x plus 2?
I factored out 4x from that group.
Oh, now I get it.
Now I'm going to factor something out of this group. The big thing is this needs to be the exact same thing as whatever you get in the second set of parentheses. I know it has to turn as that. They have to be the same.
Now we don't know what we're going to factor.
What do I have to factor out?
1.
Not just 1. Yeah, negative. It's going to be confusing for the first couple steps. Just do rough practice rather than make it easier. Now I really have my two factors. I have the two binomials that I need. One of them is really easy to pick out. It's the thing that's in these parentheses, x plus 2. The other one is the two GCFs that I factored out. It's the two numbers that came to the outside of the parentheses. And it's with the sign, 4x. I took out of that one, negative 1, I took out of that one. Keep the sign there, and just put them together as an addition or subtraction problem.
Okay.
That is the two factors of that. Yeah, but when that is not 1.
So you
It's not the exact same thing. If this isn't 1, we're not allowed to use what we did before. Something needs to multiply to give us that 4x squared. That's going to come to this 4x and that just times x. I'm going to do another practice problem. Hopefully it gets a little bit easier. First off, is there any GCF that I can factor out of there? Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be 2x2 and 30. That's the A and the C.
No, before I do that, can I factor anything out of all 3 of these?
Oh, yeah. 2.
I'm going to take 2 out. And that's actually going to leave me with the exact same problem that we were doing before. What does that break down into?
You get that?
How do we factor that?
1.
What's going to multiply to be 15 and add the 8?
What about the extra?
2 is just going to sit on the outside.
Oh, so it's going to be 3. No. Nothing.
What multiplies to be 15 and adds to be 8? Yeah.
5 plus 3.
X plus 3 and x plus 1. That is a lot easier than that. That's why we want to see if there's a GCF in the beginning. If you can factor out a GCF, sometimes it just becomes a 1 in front, and that process is a lot less work than factoring by group. Alright, what is A times C on that one? There is no GCF on that. I think we'll divide 5, 14, and 8. What's A times C? 5 times 8. So AC is 40. B is negative 14. What's going to multiply to be 40 and then add to be negative 14? John, what's that going to be? Negative 10 and negative 4. Those multiply to give us that. and the add gives that. These are the two numbers that you're going to have in the middle of this now. 5x squared doesn't change. I'm going to split it into these two. It doesn't really matter which order I'm going to do it in. I'm going to put the 10 in front. Again, that really doesn't change anything. I'm confused on that step so far. Which part?
Just go on.
I mean, we should see why those are the same thing. That and that should seem like the same thing. I didn't change anything about the x squared or the 8. All I did was split this into those two. We had an x already. So all I'm really doing is splitting that up. And the whole reason I'm doing that is so that I can factor this and factor that to get those two separate groups there. What can I factor out of that first set of groups, do you think? There's a 5 and an x in common there. That's going to come to the outside. That leaves me with just an x and a -2. What can I factor out of this to make it the exact same thing as what I had in that parentheses? That's really important. That needs to show up again in the second set of parentheses. So what does that have to be?
We're going to factor 4 minus 4 divided by 4.
And factor out -4. We're not sure what happened there. Really, I have my two factors now. There's stuff in the parentheses. That and that. That's one of them. And the second one comes from the two GCFs that we factored out. 5x and -4. Again, if you're unsure if you get it right, you can pull that back out. You can multiply these together and make sure you get that as right. How do I start the next one? Matthew, what's my first step on the next one? Yeah, what is that? Really, it's just 2 times 10. So it's A times C. It's the first number times the last number. That's 20. The B is 9. What combination is going to work there? What's going to give us 20 when we multiply and add to 9? Yep. Yep. Wait, what did you say? 4 times 5. Yeah. So 2x squared doesn't change. This gets split into the two factors of 20. And the 10 doesn't change. What can I factor out of these first two terms?
You can't factor out a number.
No, we can't factor out a number. You're right about that, but there's something that we can.
We can factor out x.
Just the x. Yep. So the x comes to the outside. It's still 2x plus 5. That part didn't change. Plus, what can come out of these two to make it the exact same as this set of parentheses? 4 divided by 2 would give us that. 10 divided by 2 would give us that 5. These parentheses need to be the same. Whatever you get on the outside, the GCFs, that's one of your terms, and the parentheses is your second. Any questions before we move on? 3, 9, and 11 on this practice is 3, 9, and 11. I'm going to explain 9 in 2 different ways. Let's say you didn't see that there was a GCF there, which is perfectly okay. Actually, it's going to work out fine at the end anyway. I'm going to do A times C that times that. 20 times negative 5, what's that right here?
What? For number 9. It's negative 100.
Negative 100, and then B is 15. The combination there that's going to work is a positive 20 and a negative 5. I'm splitting this into positive 20 and negative 5. So I really didn't change this at all. I just split it into a 20 and a negative 5. Now I'm going to factor out the biggest thing from this 20x squared and 20x. I'm going to take out whatever I can from both of those. That's going to be 20x. That leaves me with just 1x here and plus 1 there. This needs to look exactly like that. When I factor that, I need to get the exact same thing. It should turn into an x plus 1. I'm always going to write that first because I know it's going to turn into this. I have to think about what's going to make that turn into an x plus 1. I have to divide that by negative 1 and divide that by negative 1. Sorry, negative 5. Let's divide both of those to change them into positive 1 and a positive 1. Now I have my two factors, 20x and minus 5. And x plus 1. That's not as factored as that gets, though. There's a GCF in this first set of parentheses. Matthew, what comes out of that first set of parentheses there? What can I divide by both of these? Yeah, by 5. I'm going to divide that by 5, divide that by 5. The 5 comes to the outside of that parentheses. Outside of that. This changes into 4x minus 1 and x plus 1. That's as factored as that gets. Okay. If I did see the GCF, it's going to make it a little bit easier, or I guess tougher, depending on how you're thinking about this. If I saw that GCF in the beginning, if I see that I can divide all of this by 5 right away, I'm going to do that, and it changes into 4x squared plus 3x minus 1. The number in front of there is 4. So A is not 1. I can't just think about what's going to multiply to be negative 1 and add up to 3. I still have to do A times C. That's going to be negative 4. B is 3. Now the combination is different. I'm going to split up this middle term into a positive 4 and a negative 1x. The 5 is still on the outside of that. When you figure out the GCF in the beginning, you take it out and it stays on the outside of the whole parentheses. Yep. Oh, that should be positive here. What can I split this into? What can I factor, Youssef? What do I factor out of these two?
4.
A little bit more. Yep, 4x. So that turns into 4x. I'm going to put all of this still in parentheses. 4x times, that becomes just x plus 1. And I still need an x plus 1 from that second set of parentheses. So that I'm dividing by negative 1. That divides by negative 1. That divides by negative 1. And now I have the two factors that I had before, 4x minus 1 and x plus 1. The GCF still follows that bottom down. Be multiplied by really all of that. That's as factored as that can get. I feel like I lost half of you. Just not even that you don't understand it, that you're literally just not listening anymore. Did that make sense? Yep.
How did you turn the positive 1 to the negative 1?
How did I turn? How did I get that negative 1? That's coming from this and this put together. The two GCFs come together and make one of mine. The other GCF, or the other factor is coming from just whatever's in the constant. Any questions on that before you hear Matthew and Youssef explain 3 and 11? Izzy, you want to take a shot at it?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Got the
Okay.
It's so hard explaining that.
It's just hard. It's not fucking salad.
Use the drug.
I'm gonna edit out anything that's not right, so you don't have to be purple on it. Alright, good.
This chick is like full on YouTuber. Best thing ever. Come on, Izzy. Explain it.
Alright, so AC is 60. So do that, and then P is 19. So write that down. And then split the term. So it's 15 and 4. And then got those in, so just add those into the equation. And then you group the first two terms together, and then factor each group by the DCF. So take out the 5 n, and then everything, and then you're left with n plus 3. Oh, I got it. Don't worry. Oh, I got you. Yeah. And then you do that on the other side. So, yeah. So then you have, don't worry about that. And then you have n plus 3 on both sides, and then your first term, the term in both parentheses. So it's n plus 3. And then the second one is the 2 GCFs, so it's 5 n plus 4.
Doesn't matter, because you can choose any color, so
Oh.
choose whatever color.
Excuse me.
It's really easy.
Black.
After it's dark enough, so it's
I know. I'll do this blue.
Alright, and it's after.
No, it's not.
Okay, yeah.
Same door.
So first we're gonna find the AC. AC is minus 24. And then B is 2. Get 8 x. 2 plus 6 x in parentheses. And then minus 4 x minus 3. And that's because anything that gets you minus 24. 6 minus 4, that gives you 2. So that's true. And then 2x times 4x plus 3. What am I supposed
It's okay, just keep going. They saw that.
They shut up.
They saw the 6. It's okay, yeah. Just keep going.
Ooh, this might not fit.
We're doing the next one.
Not with me. We're gonna be 4. We're gonna get 4x plus 3. And then we're gonna get the book and 2 greatest